Sacred Sites with Steve Ray, here on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
I just got off the plane last night from almost 20 days in Italy with 100 people. For 15 of those days, I had 100 people, 2 buses full. And we traveled all the way from Milan in the north down through Pavia, where Augustine's buried, to Assisi and Siena, and all over the place. So we saw the face cloth of Christ in Montepello, the Eucharistic miracle in Lanciano. We saw Padre Pio in San Giovanni Rotondo. And then we hit Rome, and there's so much to see. We packed 4 days. We packed things in. I think the highlight, of course, was for everybody was getting to see the Pope, because it was only the second time he's come out in the general audience. And you don't know, he changed the schedule around a little bit from what Pope Francis used to do. So we had to be there early. We didn't know. This is kind of a mystery until after he does it a few weeks or months. But we were the first ones there, and we got the front row. That was just incredible. And everybody really said, man, are we glad we came with you? Because we know how to do this. We've done it so many times. We got everybody right up in the front row. Then you have to wait for 2 hours and before he comes out. But then what he does is he gets in that Pope mobile. And the way it's arranged is that they set the chairs in big sections with barriers. And then there's like a road in between all the barriers. So he goes up the middle and over the front and around and then back through the middle and then up the center and all the way around to the back. And you're just hoping that you get to see that you get a good view of him when he comes by. So we had the front row seat. And what happens then too is these big sections, you get people filling the sections. But when the Pope comes by, everybody wants to go over to the end of the section. So they're trying to climb over top of you. I've had people get on my shoulders before I can push them down, and so that they want to get over you so they get a picture of the Pope as he comes by. Well, I've got some really great videos and pictures of the Pope. I put them up on my website at CatholicConvert.com. And everybody in our group got amazing videos and pictures of the Pope as he went by. And so I was with a nice couple from Mumbai, India, and we kind of protected our turf there along the barrier where we were. And it was kind of fun. And we stuck together. We said, yeah, we got to be good Catholics. And sometimes you need to use your elbows. I tell our group, when you're not in America, Americans tend to be pretty polite most of the time. But other people just aren't like that. Other nationalities just are not polite like that. And I say, God gave you elbows, and I'm going to teach you how to use them. So I'm sorry to say that, but it really is like that in parts of the world when you're going to places like that. But the Pope, it was very refreshing to us to see the Pope. It's kind of like a dark cloud has lifted and this bit of joy. I mean, everybody was very enthusiastic. And I got a picture I want to show you. Just came off the printer. That was our view of the Pope right there.
That's pretty close up. When he
went by, that's what we saw. And I got video of this and pictures. And everybody was just ecstatic. Now, I told my group, if you find somebody with a baby, stand next to the baby. And that, because I call a baby at a general audience Pope bait, because if the Pope sees a baby, it's like a fish seeing a worm. He'll stop and he'll come down and say hello to the baby, and there he is, click, click, right in front of you. So always look for a baby, get as close as you can, and if somebody comes up with the baby, let them get in there, because it'll attract the Pope to stop and say hello. That's happened to us many times. So it was just very refreshing. And then after he drives around, then he sits up in the front. And it was lovely to hear the Pope address us in beautiful English. Every other time that we've been there recently, the Pope would do his native language, like John Paul II. I met John Paul II twice, by the way. I'll tell you a little bit about that after this. But then they have people read his message in like 8 languages: German, French, Spanish, Italian. They even did it in Arabic this time, and English. So it gets kind of boring. I have to say this. I don't, you think a general audience is also thrilling, but you're sitting there listening through 5 or 10 minutes of German, then 5 or 10 minutes of Spanish, then 5 or 10 minutes of Italian, and then Arabic, and then the other languages. And finally, he says, and the Holy Father would like to greet you all in English. And all of a sudden, the whole crowd goes, yay! And it was very nice. And he did it himself this time. He didn't have somebody else read it. And he said, stay to the end because we're going to sing the Our Father in Latin. Now, you know, he's doing a lot with Latin. I think he's sending a message to people that he loves the tradition that has been kind of taken away recently. And I think he's giving us a message that he loves the traditions, and we're going to see a little shift back towards that. So at the end, he sang it himself too. I mean, right, beautiful, right in front of the microphone. And then they got these Teletron TVs, is that what they're called? Where so you can see him up close, and he's raising his hand, praying the Our Father. And then he blesses everybody. He blesses all the items. He blesses all of the people, any religious items that you bring, you hold them up, and then they've been blessed by the Pope. And then he blesses, he said, and this blessing extends to your families and your children and to those who are sick. So that was really nice. So everybody goes home with a blessing for their family from this. So everybody's so excited. It was just a thrilling day. And that was probably the highlight of the whole thing. And I put up a nice video and pictures. Now, I'll really quickly tell you about the time that my wife and I got to see John Paul II. Thinking he'd be a saint someday, but not sure. But now we have rosaries that he gave us, rosaries that were given to us by a saint. But I remember he was there, and it was the year 2000, the year of grace and Jubilee, and I wanted to see him, so we sent a fax. We knew Bishop Jivitz, who was his secretary. So I knew a friend in the Vatican who gave me his fax number. So every day I sent a fax over to him, and every day we got a response. No possible. Jubileo year. Too busy. So finally, the last day, the day we were going to go, day before we had to leave home, I get a text back and a fax, and it says, be at the bronze door at 7 a.m. for a private mass with John Paul II. Well, I only have this kind of clothes, right? So I went to my friend. He owns a restaurant, and he's about 250 pounds or so. He's running down the sidewalk with me. He said, follow me. And right when the store was closing, he said, oh, open the door. And I bought a suit, but I didn't. You know how you have to get them tailored? Well, my wife had to pin them. She spent 2 hours that night pinning them, the legs and the sleeves. If Pope John Paul II would have looked carefully, he'd have seen pins all over holding all the sleeves and the little pant legs and so on. Well, anyway, we got there that morning, and we were ushered in, and we had front row seats in this little chapel that only holds 25 people. And I remember, this will sound funny, but I remember sitting in the front row there. I could have reached out and touched him. He was kneeling and facing the altar and the sacrament, and he was praying. And I thought, I think silly, I think crazy. I'm not a normal person most of the time. And I remember thinking, I could reach over. He's so old and frail. I could reach over and push him, and he'd fall down. And yet, at the same time, he's the most powerful man in the world. What a dichotomy! Just a weak, frail little man with his slippers on, and yet he's morally the most powerful man in the world, carrying the keys of Peter for the kingdom of God. Well, we had mass, and then we came out from the mass, and then he greets us all. So I'm in line. I have my book, Crossing the Tiber, by the way, the one you're giving away right now. We crossed the Tiber while we were in Rome, and I made a big deal. The bus went over. I said, hey, buddy, we're going to cross the Tiber. Now you get to cross the Tiber with me. But I remember having that book, and I signed it to him, and I had this little speech prepared that I'm a convert, and I'm so happy to meet you, and you were the Pope that was there when I came into the church, and thanks for the catechism too, by the way, because that was 1994, and that was like a gift from him to us. So when he came out, I started to cry, and I had my book. And my wife jokingly says it was the first time I ever saw Steve not say a word. Can you believe it? She says. And when the Pope came, I just started to cry because it was a very emotional moment. I really loved John Paul II. And I just wept and I wept, and he blessed me and he gave me the rosary. Now, my wife, on the other hand, had a prayer. She wanted to raise up a priest. I'll have to tell that story another time. But she got on her knees and he had his hands all, what? He says, what you want? She said, I want to raise up a priest. And he said, and he starts praying for her like this. And I'll tell that story maybe next week, the miracle story that we have as a result of John Paul II's prayer. But that was my time of meeting John Paul II. We were able to do it again a second time, and I'm really honored. And also we met Cardinal Ratzinger, Pope Benedict, and had Mass with him too. So anyway, I'm out of time already, but that was our trip to Rome back in 2000 and our trip to Rome today, and I'll tell you more about my wife and her prayer next week.
Sacred Sites with Steve Ray is heard live every Monday on the Guadalupe Radio Network program Morning Joy, hosted by Keith Downey. For more authentic Catholic content, go to grnonline.com/joy.